Welcome back to Knights of the World number 9, hosted by Ian Pierce. And today we have joining us John Vespasian. He is the writer of 11 books. So how are you doing today, John?
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Like, where'd you come from?
Yeah, I'm European, so this is why I have a funny accent. And I started to write books about personal development 11 years ago out of sheer frustration because I could not find the kind of books I wanted to read. And what I've been doing for the last 11 years is to write a strange, unusual brand of books based on history. And what I do is to go through hundreds and hundreds of biographies of different people, different professions, different centuries, different countries, and trying to draw from those stories lessons that we can apply today in the 21st century.
Okay. So where did you go to school?
I went to school in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been traveling for the last now 30 years. So I've lived in different countries. I've been to the US many times, but I spent most of my life in Europe.
Where'd you go in the US?
I've been in New York, I've been in San Francisco, I've been in Miami,
Oh, wow,
New
all
York a
over
few
the place.
times. So yeah, over the place. Well, not in the Middle West,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm quite familiar. And I follow the news from the US every day, so I'm quite familiar.
Oh, wow. So, like, what other European countries have you been to?
I've been in Italy, Germany, Belgium, Spain, UK, Austria, Switzerland, Russia. I consider Russia also part of Europe. So all over the place. And for Americans, it looks very exotic, but you have to realize that European countries are very small. And you can drive through sometimes through a country in a few hours. So it's not so exotic.
So what are some of the jobs that you had over the period of your life?
Yeah, mostly I spent my career doing commercial activities, international projects, and this kind of stuff, with a special component of being international. Since the beginning, I had a passion for language since I was basically a teenager, and I spent a lot of time traveling and picking up languages. I really have a great interest in culture. And eventually I used the whole background for writing books. But for Americans, it's not so usual to learn the second language because the country is so huge. And basically you need a second language. Everybody speaks English. But this is one of the recommendations I usually tell my books people. Try to use the opportunity to learn the second language, even if you live in a large country like the US or like the UK. It's very useful for developing your career, developing your talent, to have still the second language. I mean, in the US, obviously, it's very easy to learn Spanish because there are so many Spanish-speaking people in the US, and you will open many opportunities for yourself. At the beginning, it's not easy to understand why second language can contribute to your career, to your personal development. But once you get into it and you discover a new language and you can make new friends and you can travel more easily, you will see many advantages. And actually, it's very, very inexpensive and very, very easy to learn the second language. You just have to put the time, maybe 15 minutes a day. Yeah?
So what languages do you speak?
I speak, in addition to Spanish and English, German, French, Dutch, some Russian. I'm learning Russian very quickly because I travel a lot in Eastern countries.
So you're like very well-rounded. You could go anywhere and almost know exactly what people are saying.
Yeah, but you have to realize it's not such a huge achievement, because I'm now 56. So basically, I learned the language every 10 years. So I mean, it's not like I'm a super genius. but I just put the time. And for most people, they find difficult to put every day 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That this is what it takes to learn the second language. It doesn't take genius, doesn't take a lot of investment financially. It's very, very, very cheap, but you have to put every day 15 minutes. Otherwise, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like, I guess like what type of books have you written? Because I know you're an author, right? And you were talking about the like what you did and stuff, and I was like, well, what other books have you written?
Yeah, my books, they revolve around the subject of rational living, because what I'm trying to do is to draw from history practical lessons. So my best-selling book, the title is The 10 Principles of Rational Living. And there is another book about how to eliminate stress, how to become more effective. So there are different aspects of personal development, with the peculiarity that they are all based on history. And the principles I draw are very practical. I do not use positive thinking and subjective, emotional recommendations, because I think for most people are not very useful unless you are naturally very enthusiastic and extroverted. For most people, positive thinking requires too much effort. So the kind of recommendations I present in my books are really low key. Anybody can implement them. You don't have to be super enthusiastic.
Hmm. So is that your favorite book that you've written?
Yeah, this is an introduction to my work, and this is what people usually read. Is the first book they pick up when they hear about my work.
So I know. So you said that was your favorite book. So what's the favorite book that you've ever read?
My old favorite book, is quite long. It's called the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
It's a book from the 18th century. It's quite long. It's 6 volumes.
Oh wow.
I find it fascinating because it's not only a fantastic piece of literature, but it gives you, I think, a great understanding of politics and human nature and history. The language is beautiful. I think it's one of the masterpieces in English language. And I recommend everybody to read, at least to read the first volume. It's about 250 pages. And you will learn a lot about human nature, history, politics, microeconomics. It's a fantastic approach to history. And basically, it tells the story of how the Roman Empire went from being a very powerful, very efficient, very wealthy organization to becoming a complete disaster, and where people were really starving and killing each other. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a story of decline. Unfortunately, it shows that the story repeats itself too often, because we have seen similar situations in history many times.
So I kind of want to drive the topic in a different direction. You know, like talking about you specifically as being an author. So what's the best part about being an author?
The best part is the interaction with people, because I very often interact with readers, whether it's through my blog or through interviews, and this actually gives me motivation to write the next books, and shows me um, how to improve. Because some things I think they're super well written and super clear, and then I realize that people see my books something completely different, and I realize, oh, I would have done this in a different way. So I try to make everything better the next time. But I have to tell you, the constant feedback, because I do a lot of interviews on the radio, the constant feedback is one of the best things, because it shows the appreciation that readers have for my books, and they give me motivation to keep writing.
So what's your favorite memory about writing? Like what's your favorite interaction or something that like you'll always remember?
My favorite memory is the way I wrote my first book, because I'm talking about something that happened 11 years ago. And I took 4 weeks of holidays, and I was writing like 10 hours a day. I thought, okay, I think I can do that. And eventually, after 1 month of really working very hard, I have a book, my first book completed. And of course, the quality was very bad. It took forever to do editorials and rewriting, so it took me months to get it done. But I wrote the complete first draft in 4 weeks, and this is a great memory because unless you do something like this, you cannot get started
Mm-hmm.
in a new area.
So would you say that you're really dedicated, or what's one word that describes who you are?
Um, I would say that I'm super organized because you can be very dedicated, but still some people take like 5 years to write a book. I am dedicated, but I'm also very organized. I have my methods for writing. I gather the information very systematically. I have a method for writing the first draft, for editing. So I'm very, very systematic. I think if you are not doing that, it's very difficult to produce one book per year.
So like what is kind of the process you go through when you're doing your writing process? Like, did you have to skip over steps in those 4 weeks, or did you just know exactly what you were gonna do?
Um, I'm now, through the years, I've become even more and more organized. So now my process works backwards. I have notes that I take because I read a lot of books, I read a lot of articles, blogs, I listen to podcasts. I make notes constantly of ideas and quotations and references. And when I want to write my next book, I pick up my notes. I have material already for the next 10 books. So I pick up my notes, I draw from them the material I need, and then I organize it, and then I start writing. So it's very, very organized from the beginning. I trust more my organization than my inspiration.
That's pretty cool. You know how you like you take notes about every single thing. You write down every single thing. Because I don't have that type of organization that I wouldn't be able to like hear someone talk and be like, ooh, that's a good idea. Like I'll think of something in the middle of the night and I'll write it down and I'll be like, nah, that was a stupid idea. But then you have all those ideas. You may have good ideas, you may have stupid ideas, but you're just like, I have these ideas if I need them, right?
Yes, and you're right that most ideas are not worth pursuing because sometimes I pick up an idea and then the next day I say, wow, this is not really useful. But if you do this systematically, and I'm a very curious person. I read a lot of blogs and listen to podcasts. I read a lot of books. You pick up ideas constantly because especially I like ideas that contradict my beliefs. And sometimes I am convinced of something, and then I listen to someone saying something completely different, and I question my ideas and say, maybe I was wrong, maybe I'm missing something here. And I like this kind of challenges because it gets me to think in a better way, more accurately. And every book, I try to put forward ideas that are more controversial, more ambitious, more innovative. And this comes from the process of constant challenge to my thinking.
So I kind of want to wrap it up here. I know that you've talked about your books and everything, but I want you to talk directly to the audience, and I want you to give some advice of some advice that you could give people.
Yes, if you pick up just one idea from this conversation, I'm going to give you one of the key principles I present in my books.
Mm-hmm.
You will be, I think, much better off in your life if you try to see your problems and your decisions and your adversity with the perspective of a lifetime. And a lifetime, I mean 85, 90 years. It's very difficult to get a habit of thinking in terms of a lifetime because most of the time we think very short term. We get anxious and we get stressed because we think in terms of weeks or months or years. But if you start to think, and if you force yourself to think in terms of a lifetime, that you're going to live normally 85, 90, 95 years, maybe 100 years, you will see that most of your problems are negligible. They are not important. You will forget them very quickly. You will forget them within a few months or a few years. And you will be able to identify the key decisions because you will see what is going to be the impact in the next decades. And this is the kind of perspective you need. Don't think in too long term in terms of centuries because it doesn't make any sense, or in terms of days. Try to think in terms of a lifetime, and you will make much better decisions, and you will be, I think, less stressed in daily life.
That's some really great advice because from what I've heard is that most people will say, "Oh, you have to plan ahead, like plan your next month, be way more organized." But I kind of like how you're saying it's just like, yeah, you may think short term, but long term is where you know you'll do the best because all your problems are very minimal. And
Yes,
so,
I think it's something I learned from history. I see in different centuries people make the same mistake, getting stressed because they make a mistake or they suffer some kind of setback. But the people who do very well, they are able to think in terms of a lifetime.
mm-hmm. So I would really like to thank you, John, for coming out here today and being on the podcast.
Many
And,
thanks, Ian.
and on the screen right here are some of the books that you can buy. And I'd really encourage you to check them out. And I bet John would really appreciate it as well. And now on the screen right here are our socials. Follow us on our Twitter at Noble Knights FHN and Instagram at Noble Knights FHN. And once again, I'd like to thank John for coming out here today. And I would like to remind you that we do appreciate like and comments. It's always appreciated to see how you felt about the episode and to see what some of the things you may have learned from John. And so I've been Ian Pierce, and I'd like to thank you guys for watching Noble Knights Podcast, and we'll see you next Friday on the Noble Knights Podcast. See ya.